Hey everybody, it's RJ, your host, and welcome to Hash It Out. In this episode, I'll be speaking with Kelsea Appelbaum of Vangst about ensuring inclusivity, accessibility, and empowerment in the cannabis industry through employment and business opportunities, and the importance of bringing a passionate and solutions-based approach to cannabis policies. We'll also discuss the myriad of barriers to entry in the cannabis industry, the recent news regarding cannabis employment restrictions in Montana, and much more. Without further ado, let's hash it out. My guest today is the head of community partnerships at the cannabis industry employment service company Vangst. Welcome to the show, Kelsea Appelbaum. Hello, how are you today, Kelsea?
Hi, I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for sitting down and having a conversation with me today, sharing all that you've got going on over at Vangst, and then going into a little bit of the hot topics regarding cannabis industry employment news. So again, just thank you so much for sitting down and having a conversation with me today. Where are you joining me virtually from today?
Yeah, happy to be here. I am joining from sunny and beautiful Denver, Colorado.
Love to hear it. Love to hear it. Y'all get in the winter weather yet? We had like a spot of it, and now we're in the mid 80s again. I can't believe it.
Yeah, I was actually laughing with people yesterday. It hasn't snowed yet, and I've been in Denver for like 5.5 years, and normally it snows by Halloween every year, and then it gets cold, and it's been like 60, 70 degrees and sunny every single day. And looking at the weather, there is no snow on the forecast for at least a couple more weeks. So it's beautiful.
Right on. You're bringing that sunshine. We could use as much vitamin D as we can in this day and age. That's for sure.
Yes, exactly.
Totally. Yeah. Well, hey, yeah, again, thank you so much for sharing all that you've got going on over at Vangst. As I mentioned during your intro, Vangst is a cannabis industry employment service company. So just to dive right in here, for those who may not be familiar, just tell me a little bit more about what exactly Vangst does to connect people with employment opportunities in the cannabis industry.
Yeah, so we love partnering with companies in cannabis and hemp. We've done so around the world since 2015, and we love building out leadership teams as well as teams from every stage of cannabis, from individuals that work in the grow all the way up to that executive and leadership team that leads the biggest companies in cannabis. A little bit about myself: I've done so in 27 states and 5 countries. I've also built out license applications in 11 states. So myself, my team, we tend to know a lot about what goes into building out great teams in cannabis, and we love doing it.
Totally. And so as head of community partnerships at Vangst, I understand that you sort of focus on educating the cannabis community on employment and business opportunities. As one of the original team members of Vangst, you said that you've had, quote, the ability to grow within the cannabis industry for the last 5 or so years. I'm just curious a little bit more about yourself and your personal journey. What spurred the desire to enter the cannabis space? And then what have you seen in the past half decade or so that you see sort of sets the cannabis industry apart from others?
Yeah, so I got into it for personal reasons. My dad is a stage 4 cancer survivor, and I'm a big believer that cannabis actually played a part in that recovery. So for me, it's just something that I was always curious and passionate about as an advocate and a lover of the plant. I was living in San Diego probably like 6 or 7 years ago and trying to get a job in cannabis and was met with every excuse as to why I wasn't the right fit. And to be honest, it was pretty disheartening. And on a whim decided to move to Denver. Also on a whim decided to walk into a cannabis event, which ironically was led by Vangst, in a hiring event to connect really passionate people with companies that were looking to grow. That was 2016. And kind of the rest is history. I met our CEO. It felt like a really natural fit. And I joined the company shortly thereafter as one of the original team members. I think something that I love about the industry is that we all have different stories. Nobody's stories is the same. Nobody's intention for getting into cannabis is the same, but we're all here because we want to be part of this experience. For me, I am somebody who is about the plant first and foremost. The plant is why I'm here. I think that regardless of what type of user you are, the plant is medicine, and it's helped me, it's helped my family, it's helped change our world in a lot of ways. And I just want to be part of that continued change and education around how it can continue to help build our world, not just from a medicinal standpoint, but also just from a socioeconomic standpoint, from an investment standpoint. It could really create new lines of generational wealth. It could really create opportunities for individuals that never really felt like they had a place in other industries. And to me, that's beautiful.
Yeah. Yeah. I that is something that has certainly never been lost on me. The fact that like cannabis just in and of itself as a naturally occurring plant has brought people together from all walks of life for centuries, for generations, like literally through trade and now through industry and community, of course. It's really the community of it all is really, I think, paramount to this industry and what sets it apart from others. I'm curious. So you work at Vangst. This is a cannabis staffing company. And you mentioned that when you were in San Diego, you were trying to get into the cannabis industry, and you were met with a lot of, you said, every excuse in the book.
Oh, yeah.
If you're comfortable sharing, of course, and if not, absolutely no pressure at all. What were the type of barriers to entry that you were experiencing in terms of joining the cannabis industry?
Yeah, I mean, all of them were not politically correct, and from like a hiring standpoint, not reasonable reasons to say no to someone. Anything from you're overqualified to I know that you say that you're going to take a pay cut, but are you actually going to take a pay cut? To you don't look cannabis enough. You don't look like our demographic. Which to me was just one of those things where I was like, I'm sorry, like the industry that I want to be a part of and the industry that I'm proud to now be a part of is really proactive in the sense of everybody can have a home here, or at least trying to create that type of culture. It doesn't really matter where you come from, as long as your intentions are right and you're willing to work really hard and invest your energy into this space. And I found that honestly, I was looking in the wrong place. So when I talk to people about finding jobs in cannabis, I try to remind them that you cannot look at it in such a one-dimensional way. Like for me, I was just applying to dispensary roles in San Diego, which at the time was a gray market. And I didn't really even understand what that meant, in 2014, 15. And now I'm able to actually help give more context. So talking to someone and understanding what their background is, what they bring to the table, how they can actually find a company that complements that, and not just complements it, but appreciates what they bring, to create a more inclusive workspace is important. All of that too helps me just have a more genuine relationship when I'm talking to people about their struggles when looking for a job in cannabis, because it's hard, just because it is, I think, officially the fastest growing industry in the world, as well as an industry that has plenty of job opportunities. It doesn't mean that it's easy, and you need to stand out, and you need to find the company that appreciates the ways that you stand out. So I always laugh that like my struggle and feeling so disheartened for so long about trying to get a job in cannabis actually made me like the best person to help people get a job in cannabis in a lot of ways, because I've heard those same excuses. I have heard all of the reasons why I'm not a good fit and felt discouraged by them. And then I've also felt empowered by realizing that the reasons why someone thought that I wasn't the best fit is actually why I'm a fantastic fit for my team and a fantastic person to represent the industry and finding a job in this industry. So it's been an interesting journey, but look, it's taken me where I am, and I'm proud of where I am, and I love doing what I do. So it all worked out. Absolutely.
I'm so hung up on you saying that you were told that you didn't look cannabis enough. Like, I don't even know what that means. Like, and like people in the cannabis community have been working for decades, right? For many years to break down that stereotype of like, what is a cannabis user? What is a stoner, for lack of a better term? And so that seems like such a great irony that they would say, oh, you don't look cannabis-y enough to work in cannabis. I don't even know what that means.
Yeah. I mean, granted, like this is also where I love telling people that you have to apply for roles where you are really excited to work. Like for me, I think I was just so focused on getting in, just like so many people are, where I was just applying to places that, yeah, maybe they weren't me. Maybe I should have back then recognized that I was applying for roles that weren't the best fit for me. And they were just hung up on how I looked, how I sounded, how I felt. One even said, "You seem too professional. We want people to be more down to earth." And I remember thinking, I was like, that's such like an ironic thing to say, because in my mind, don't you want your business to grow and scale, and don't you want to tap into more demographics, which to me leads to why you should have a diverse team. If you're only catering to the team that you have, or the clientele that you have, or the mission that you have, versus understanding what you can also tap into in the future, which is a more diverse market, a more diverse demographic, you want to then bring in a diverse team. So once again, like I look back and I like laugh at all of this, because first of all, I was really young and I was going through this and feeling discouraged by the feedback that I was getting. But that feedback has quite literally made me good at my job, because anytime a company says that they want to look for a carbon copy of someone, I can actually show them that that's not the right thing to do. We should not be looking for carbon copies of the exact team that you have. You should be getting out of that comfort zone and bringing in different mindsets, different cultures, different people, different personalities, different everything. And that actually leads to a more well-rounded industry and product offering and retail space and clientele, all of the things. So it's funny to look back and say that, because I've been with Vangst now for 5 years. So it feels like literally a lifetime ago. But it shaped how I look at it now. And if I was just brought into a cannabis company in San Diego, which was very gray market at the time, and I was brought in for all the reasons that I felt like I deserved it, but they didn't recognize, then I probably wouldn't be where I am today. And I probably would have been really capped in my experience. And also I think that, look, a lot of people think that you have to be in a plant touching environment to work in cannabis and represent the plant. I'm in an ancillary position and I love it. I love that I'm not tied to a license, tied to a state, tied to one type of thing. And I could actually represent all things in cannabis. And that's actually more fun for me. So I'm able to actually call on some of those experiences that now are laughable, but back then were definitely discouraging, and help other people understand that there is a light at the end of the tunnel that you can look forward to.
Totally, yeah. And I love that you mentioned that the roots of the cannabis industry spread much farther than just plant touching, as you say. There are so many ancillary industries and businesses and opportunities there. I also wanted to talk about, the sense of empowerment that comes with achieving successful employment, because I understand that, in addition to working with Vangst, you also in the past worked for 6 years with the human rights organization A Wider Circle in Washington, D.C., if I have that right.
Yeah.
Not
that long, but I volunteered for quite a bit.
Gotcha. Cool. Right on. So when it comes to working directly with the community, tell me about the sense of empowerment that one feels when they have, for example, a furnished home with A Wider Circle, or they've gained successful employment through a service like Vangst. What does that do for an individual's sense of dignity, of self-worth, and things of the like?
Yeah, I think that for me, I'm someone that takes such pride in everything that I do. And I think that trying to think of the right word to say, like as a community as a whole, so not just cannabis, but just being someone who's existing in our world right now, you should take pride in what you do, and you should create an environment within yourself, within your company, within the industry that you're representing, regardless of if it's cannabis or not, to be proud of that. And I think for me, what makes me proud to work in cannabis is just genuinely that I get to help people, and I get to give people insight into a world that maybe they have trepidations around, maybe they're curious about, but don't know who they can trust. And that to me gives me a lot of pride. I love that I can, in my job, honestly, I'm very lucky that I can travel the world and see people and talk to people from all different types of backgrounds and help create a sense of commonality. And that is that we all want to just do better and we want to be better. And when people start looking at cannabis as a way to actually do those things that they've wanted, that's beautiful. So like when people are coming from more of a business-minded mentality, well, perfect. You can build a business that could be $1 billion business in $1 billion industry. that's beautiful. What other time can you do that?
Yeah.
And then if you're talking to someone that's really just an advocate for the plant, that's beautiful too. And you can actually be that in this industry. And I think that it creates a lot of commonality, and something that not every industry offers. Like for me, I don't think that I would ever feel successful in tech. I would never feel successful in agriculture because it's not something that sparks passion. But cannabis, it's hard to not feel passionate about our industry when our industry is quite literally saving lives, creating jobs during recessive times, and creating opportunities for people that didn't have those same opportunities in another industry because it's so diluted. So there's a lot of beauty in it. I try to focus on that. I think that there's a lot that we can do more of. And I'm very vocal about that even if we are very progressive in some ways, we are very regressive in others. But that's why I always encourage people to speak up. And if you're going to talk to me about your opinions, you should probably talk to policymakers and you should advocate for better policy. I know I do it, and I'm proud to do the work that I do as an individual to try to educate people on better policy. But, just because it's a beautiful industry to work in, it doesn't mean that you can just take it for what it is. You actually have to do more. And I'm a big believer that if you are in this industry, it's a privilege.
Absolutely.
There are 40,000 plus people still in prison because of a plant that we are profiting off of, that we are creating that generational wealth that I mentioned. And we should see that as a privilege, and we should take that privilege and allow that to spark other conversations that lead to more progressive policy. So I always like to bring it back to that. I think a lot of people don't. They think it, but they're afraid to say it. But we have to talk about it. There is a lot of pride in our industry, but there is a lot that we have to use that pride to fuel, and that is to make it better for the next generation that joins us.
Absolutely. Now, speaking of making it better, right, and creating opportunity, right, and this balance between regressive and progressive, and how, a lot of the times, particularly in the U.S., in terms of cannabis legislation or policy reform, it can really seem like two steps forward, one step back in a lot of ways. Montana. So this has been, in a topic of discussion lately. The Montana State Department of Revenue informed lawmakers recently that it may be possible to modify a couple of regulations that the department is calling for to be added to the state's recreational cannabis legislation, which is forthcoming. One of them would restrict dispensary employment opportunities for those with prior criminal or cannabis-related convictions, including all infractions on, quote, any provision of the marijuana laws, end quote, in Montana or other states. So tell me first what your thoughts are on all of that, and then what implications do you think this might have for for Montana's cannabis industry workforce if this were to be included in the state's legislation?
Yeah, well, first and foremost, Montana is not the only state that has done this.
Sure.
There are still a lot of states where you cannot actually represent the plant if you have been convicted for the plant. And that's just beyond disappointing. I remember years ago when New Jersey had originally opened up and we were hiring really major roles, VP of cultivation, COO, et cetera, in the state of New Jersey. It wasn't even very clear that they weren't allowing people from backgrounds, cannabis related or not, but those convictions actually prevented them from working in New Jersey. And I learned very early on, this was probably 2017, that this is not an industry that is perfect. And there's a lot of people that are creating policy that supports their bank account, but doesn't support doing the right thing. And the right thing in my mind, and I think most would agree, is that anybody should have an opportunity to work in cannabis, especially those that have been convicted for the plant in the past.
Yes.
That's my opinion. I'm proud of my opinion. I will speak my opinion everywhere I go because I think it's the right opinion when it comes to this industry. How can we profit off of those who have served time if we are not giving them opportunities? And I always remind people, it's not just cannabis convictions, because a lot of times people who are convicted for cannabis actually get 10 other convictions thrown at them, such as money laundering, which could also prevent them from working in cannabis.
Yeah.
But this is a much bigger issue than just the laws that affect employment. It's the laws that affect expungement. are individuals that are expunged for cannabis convictions also going to be expunged or considered to be expunged for the convictions that went along with cannabis? Because those can also prevent them from contributing to a regulated society. I don't think it's black and white. I don't think that there's any right answer, because this is an industry that's building every single day. So in my mind, the right answer for today is that anybody that has been convicted for a crime or not should have an opportunity to work in cannabis. And we need to advocate for those policies. Step 2 would be also making sure that those records are getting expunged that don't actually focus on cannabis, but were thrown at them to make that conviction even stronger through the, in my mind, unjust laws of that state. Hearing that Montana is doing that is just, to be honest, it's disheartening. Anytime that I feel like our industry is taking a step forward, I do feel like we're taking 2 step backs.
Right.
And those steps back actually affect people. And the fact that when a state like Montana, which isn't the most progressive state, but actually allows a cannabis program, which will actually create more revenue for the state, create more job opportunities, create more opportunities to be part of a really positive movement that cannabis is creating. And then they create these policies. It's almost like they aren't going into this movement for the right reasons. And they aren't going into this industry for the right reasons. And to be honest, that comes from education. There's a lot of people that are in positions of power, specifically in the political sector, that just don't know any better. And that means that we need to speak louder, speak more passionately, speak more proactively with these individuals. And instead of martyring them for the mistakes that they're making, empowering them to make better decisions. So I would absolutely encourage anybody that is in Montana, is looking to have licenses in Montana, is interested in even the cannabis industry as a whole in Montana, to start talking to these people. Something that I remind every single person of is COVID was actually kind of a blessing for our industry. It showed that we were recession proof. It showed that we were able to withstand a global pandemic, which shut down industries across the world.
Right.
And not just survive, but be considered essential. But something that's even better than that is that there's a lot more access for people to actually influence their local governments, or not even local governments from across the globe, because it's all virtual. I can sit in on a discussion with policymakers in New Jersey from my couch. I can do that from the comfort of my home and in a safe environment, and I could still create change.
Right.
There's so many events that talk about this, and you could buy a plane ticket if you want to, but you can also join a Zoom login and actually ask a question, create a statement. You can go to social media and start advocating for these things. So while COVID was destructive in some ways, it also created that opportunity to unify our voices a little bit more. And for people that are advocating for cannabis policy in Montana, it's better, instead of like going and raising your fists and getting frustrated, to create opportunities and create an understanding of why this is important. Right. It's also really important to note that a lot of the skill set that we get in cannabis, whether we want to admit it or not, comes from people that worked in an unregulated market, really paving the way for us.
Yes.
Some of the best people that have created fantastic genetics come from a black or gray market. A lot of the testing that we have has come from individual contributors. A lot of the education that we have has come from somebody that has successfully gone from, the Emerald Triangle and are now going and actually advocating on a regulated basis. So if you're looking at it from that sense, I think that anybody can play a role in creating better policy, and it's just about education. Like, there are many things that in the comfort of my own home I want to yell about and scream about, and this is probably one of those things, or definitely is, I should say.
Sure.
But I would rather, exactly. Like, I would rather just take to a more productive conversation about it and really not create a sense of intimidation, but almost embrace the unknown with these people. These politicians don't know any better, and we're judging them for something that they don't know any better on. And so we have to be the people as a community as a whole to educate them, and do so in an embracing way, do so in a way that we will welcome change versus, bury them because they didn't make the right decision originally. I mean, look at New York and New Jersey. They had really restrictive laws on who can work in cannabis, how they can work in cannabis. Anything with expungement was, had a blind eye turned to it. And now these states, as they're going into an adult use market, are getting forced to face those different struggles that they didn't want to face before, and they're gonna have to change policy. Like whether New Jersey is ready to admit it or not, they have to change the policies, and they are, on who can actually work in cannabis and represent the plant. And I always say the plant doesn't choose who represents it, so we all have to represent it well. So yeah, Montana is definitely disheartening, but it's not the first. It's not going to be the last. And the best that we can do is just advocate for a more educated system, better policy, and work with the people that are creating that policy to help guide them through this journey. Because I don't know, I wouldn't be where I am if somebody didn't take me under their wing and guide me through. I've worked in, at this point, probably more states than most in cannabis, more countries than most, and represented more companies of all sizes than most. Yeah. And the only reason I've been able to do that is because people at every single stage of my growth in cannabis have supported me. And have looked at me with an embracing quality versus a judgmental one for the mistakes that I could potentially make. So for anybody that I guess is listening, if you are passionate about this, which I know I am, talk to people in Montana, go there, visit them, see when they have their, town halls, and advocate for this, create solutions, give them examples. I can help anybody with that. Yeah. But we have to be more solutions oriented as a whole, and embrace the challenges to affect better change.
Absolutely. Yeah. I'm definitely with you on that. I love that you mentioned the importance of being solution based and solution focused instead of just, raising your fist and perhaps firing off an angry tweet or two, which I mean,
it helps.
Go ahead. It helps. It helps. Yeah, it helps. But definitely, taking that step further to contact, the policymakers themselves to let them know, because you said they don't know any better. It's up to us to promote that education. And I've said it before on the show that the education never stops in the cannabis industry. I think that's one thing that we've learned so far throughout the years, is that the advocacy and the education, it's still just as important as it was before legalization, to make sure that we're doing things the right way, and not allowing these people who are upholding the industry before it was legalized and legitimized, preventing them from being shut out from this now legitimized industry is of the utmost importance. And so, I'm totally with you on that sentiment.
I was actually in New York. I was in New York speaking at an event this past week, which was beautiful, and I loved it. And I was talking to some people from New Jersey, people that are influencing policy there and creating policy. And we were talking through this actually, and I told them, I was like, well, you have a thriving industry around alcohol, beer and alcohol, and adult entertainment and all of these things. And let me ask you this, if somebody were to apply for a job with, Celestial or a liquor shop or anything in alcohol, do you screen them if they have had a DUI? Have you looked into their background? Are they allowed to work in the industry if they've had a DUI, whether it's been expunged or not?
Right.
And they're like they kind of laughed at me, like, what a ridiculous question. I was like, I know it seems ridiculous, but I know that you have people working for companies like Drizzly that delivers alcohol that maybe had a DUI in the past.
Sure.
Whether it was expunged or not, it's not really in their policy in most states that they can't work in the industry. They can't contribute to a more educational way of distributing alcohol, even if they've had alcohol issues in the past, such as getting a DUI, driving under the influence. And creating examples like that where you guys as in the people that are creating policy are creating more issues just because it's cannabis than realizing that this is a normal industry. And we have to normalize cannabis. We have to understand that if you're going into cannabis and you're going to create a cannabis market, such as Montana doing it, you have to understand that this is now part of your normal state's operations. This is now not a industry that should be shunned. If you're embracing it, embrace it and treat it like you do other industries to the best of your ability, right? Like there's certain things from a federal level that we're never going to be able to do until legalization happens, if and when. But until we have that, treat it like another industry. Be respectful and understand that this plant doesn't really have that many differences between what creates beer, hops, right? They're both plants. They're both should be treated, in my mind, equally if you are already taking that initial step of, we are going to have a cannabis program. And sometimes having those conversations, people are like, wow, I feel stupid. And like, why didn't I think of it in such like a simple way that allows them to then create a more normal conversation.
Yeah.
Why would Montana want to create these types of policies if they're not going to do the same for alcohol, if they're not going to do the same for adult entertainment, if they're not going to do the same for really any other industry that they support in their state? And having those conversations and not threatening people and not telling people you're wrong, but instead you're doing it right in other industries, so just allow us to do it right in our industry too. That's how positive change is happening. And then, of course, you have to remind them of that about a million times before they actually adopt the policy. So you have to be really patient, and you also have to be somebody that's okay with saying the same 20 things a million times.
Right.
But either way, if you create more normal comparisons that make even the most unapproachable subjects approachable for people, that's where, in my mind, change occurs. And I'm a big believer that, like I said before, it's a privilege to work in this industry, and with privilege comes great responsibility in my mind. We have to advocate for the plant. We have to advocate for better policy. We have to be proud of advocating for better policy. And it starts at an individual level, and then it grows to a community, and then that community supports the change on a bigger scale.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm right there with you. The humans have a knack for overcomplicating things. You know, for a lot of lawmakers and legislators, they seem to have a very convenient sense of short-term memory when it comes to certain things. So it's certainly up to the people in the cannabis community and the people in the cannabis industry to hold their feet to the fire and to keep them accountable up until we see the policies that are truly inclusive and truly beneficial to everybody. And I'm right there with you. Now, for those, see, I told you before we started recording, I said my production assistant dog, she will let me know if anyone is thinking about coming through. She's protecting me from Amazon. I know. She said it's not Black Friday yet. Hold on, let me get her real quick. Oh, she's like, oh, let me at him.
So funny.
Okay, perfect. She had great timing because we're at the end of the interview. We're about to wrap it up. So she held out long enough.
Good.
Perfect. I thank you so much for being generous with your time, by the way. I know we're over the 20 minutes that I said that we usually shoot for, but with a great conversation like this, you know, I love when people are generous with their time. But okay, so we have a cut here, and we'll pick it up from right here. All right. Well, yeah, thank you so much, Kelsea, for being very generous with your time and sharing all of your perspective, all you've got going on over at Vangst, and of course, your perspective in the latest trending cannabis news in terms of cannabis industry staffing. My last question for you before I let you go is, where can the people out there stay up to date with all that you've got going on over at Vangst, over in the World Wide Web?
Yeah, I always tell people, reach out to me directly. I try to answer every single call, text, email. My email is kelsey@vangst.com. Pretty easy to remember. I'm always welcome to having a conversation, helping you if you have a question around how to advocate for better policy around employment, how to get into the industry, where you should go next and grow in the industry. I always say that I tend to be a confidant for a lot of people in this space, and I want to support them. So feel free to reach out at any point. In terms of where I'll be next, where will I be next? I'll be at Hall of Flowers and then Emerald Cup. So I'm excited to see everybody. Yeah, I'm excited to see everybody there.
Right on.
And close out the year with our cannabis family.
I dig it.
Feel free to reach out at any point.
Yes, will do. Well, I wish you all of the best over at Vangst and all that you're doing over there. We will certainly be keeping an eye on all that you've been doing. And again, thank you so much for offering your perspective. I definitely I appreciate all the information that you gave and the passion that you shared during this conversation in terms of inclusivity and accessibility to employment and staffing and business opportunities in the cannabis industry. So thank you so much for what you're doing, and thank you very much for your time.
Always happy to help. We'll talk soon.
Yes, absolutely. Kelsea Appelbaum, everybody. Thank you all so much for watching, liking, commenting, and subscribing. That is it for Hash It Out, y'all. I am your host, RJ Balde, and I will catch y'all in the next one. Peace out. Hey everybody, thanks for checking out our channel. Click here to watch another episode of Hash It Out. To find more cannabis industry reporting, insider stories, and to stay up to date on the latest trends, make sure to subscribe and keep up with our TRICHOMES community app. Download it now for free, and we'll see you there.